The Black Management Forum celebrated its 40th anniversary, and we were very fortunate to catch up with some of the people who presented at the conference. And these are leaders in their own right. Nolitha Fakude, the former president of BMF, is with us here, as well as well-known business leader Sipho Nkosi, who's in mining. He's also with us here. And I want to pick up on a few points now and bring the problems closer to home about our own personal responsibilities. And before I get to that, let me talk about the status of women and the transformation as it affects women and black women in particular, because it's black empowerment, broadly speaking, and then there's transformation and empowerment for women on the other side. Are they mutually exclusive or are they all-inclusive?
Actually, Tim, in South Africa, for us to talk about transformation and in particular black economic empowerment, you can't talk about that without talking about women economic empowerment. So those are the two sides of the same coin, as I like to say to people. And the issue here is that, again, when you look at the last 20 years, because we're coming from the common apartheid enemy we're focusing on, we then said, let's just focus on black economic empowerment. And the gender agenda kind of was left running on its own without any clear direction. And it's probably in the last 5 or 6 years that we have started seeing more focus and emphasis coming through from business, in particular for the women to be represented in key decision-making positions. However, government has always had good transformation when it comes to women. You look at parliament representation, you look at even cabinet level, there are women in key positions in government. But the private sector and business has really struggled. And that's, for me, the issue that the BMF also has got to look into as we move forward.
To go back to the point you made about the mining charter, Mr. Nkosi, you said, you know, after 15 years or so, there's still issues there that are being resolved at this time. And I heard in your speech you were also questioning whether the language used when we discuss the economy is correct, that of empowerment, because empowerment implies somebody must hand over something to you. And that the moment you expect somebody to do that for you, they're going to do it at their own pace. So what's the better way then? And you're speaking from experience here. What is the better way of getting more people to own their own businesses in this economy?
I think we need to learn from others. We are not the first, and probably we're not going to be the last country or society that is transforming or changing. Everyone, every society that is going through this change would face these issues. But people learn certain things out of that, and they pick up some lessons that would suit them. For instance, the big issue and the examples that I was giving. The big issue is, well, do we have a vision of what we want to do in the country, whether it be mining and manufacturing or anything? Maybe we do have a vision because you see it in the National Development Plan. But how then do we execute that one? Is a military-style plan to make it work? Because for it to work, you need a couple of things to work. I mean, if you look at and I always look at the Afrikaner in this country and say they did it well. Because firstly, they focus on their own and said, you know what, for us to transform, let's look at ourselves. Of course, it was a bad example because we wouldn't be where we are today if the whole country was, and all populations were looked into. But when they look at that, they look at key things. Well, it was mining, it was agriculture, and then agriculture became, everyone went there and they said, well, there's mining. It's not going to work for us. We need more than mining in order to absorb our own people. And there's a big poor white problem that we have in the country. So they, okay, we need to industrialize the country. So they create a strategy to industrialize the country. And they focus on making it work. And part of the ingredients was cheaper material or ingredients to make it work and allow other people to work there. The second thing was money. You can't do this thing without money. So capital was raised. They put together their own money. Because once you have your own money, then you are in a position to do that. And the third thing is that that money, and I was saying this to the forum today, it has to circulate amongst us. Because if it's going to go out there to the consumption sector, we end up buying Bentleys, we end up buying Maseratis, instead of keeping the money amongst ourselves for the development of our own people. So that's very, very critical. So to marshal all those things, it's critical that we have a vision, we have good leadership, because without that, it's not going to work. And the biggest other big component is education, education, education. Without that, we're dead.
Well, let me go back to the workplace in corporate South Africa. People complain about, well, particularly from a woman's perspective, the glass ceiling, that you reach a certain point where you cannot progress any further. I'm sure there's a lot of that. I would like to hear your comments in that regard. But even in the case where it's black people in leadership, many complain and say they close the door behind themselves as soon as they get to the top. What's your view?
I think the phenomenon of glass ceiling is there in South Africa in business, but it's also there globally. I was just saying to the forum now that for me it's interesting to just watch the American elections conversation where you've got a Hillary Clinton coming from a different party, but a very competent person and a woman. And then on the other party, you've got Donald Trump, who is not that competent in my mind, but the American population seem to be confused as to whom to trust. And this narrative of continuing to say, we don't trust Hillary, so we better go for the alternative of Trump, for me almost plays back to the issues in corporate environment. Because people come in, and you come in with your skill, with your competence, and they look at you and they say, there's a black man, there's a black woman. Well, maybe I'll first trust the black man before I can trust the black woman, because in my mind, in my psyche, the black woman that I know is still the one who's my domestic worker at home, and I haven't transformed myself personally to move beyond looking at her as just someone who's working at home, or maybe even better, my daughter. Now my daughter, whom I love, I treat her differently. So I can't imagine her doing these things, going into a boardroom because it's rough.
Sure.
So we've got a lot of work to do, even around the thinking and the mindset and the paradigms.
I want to go back to the point then about circulating the money. We've got the formations that we've mentioned earlier on. But we need to develop, let's use that word, consciousness then. Where do you start to have that conscious, practical things that should be happening now that are not happening? And let me also add this comment, that I suppose from the point of view of the 10% white population in South Africa, some people might be asking themselves, why do blacks complain so much and want empowerment from us instead of creating it themselves? After all, they are in charge, politically speaking.
Yeah. It's a point to be made, but how do we conscientize people? I mean, I'm hoping that as we talk today, someone who's listening will feel that it's important that we understand that on our own we can do that. And one of the things that I don't think we've done and done well is the reconstruction of a soul of a black man or black person, the confidence level and the go-get attitude that I can do it. And it's important. The second thing, going back to the same things that I said, loving my own people, loving my own country. After all, it's the only country I have. And loving what? And loving myself. Because if I love myself, chances are that I'm not going to get into things like corruption, because I have a legacy that I have to keep, which is me, which resonates with black people. And it's important that I do that, because once I fall and do other things, other people will point fingers. Look at them. They took over power, but look at them. But those things, if they are there within ourselves. So it doesn't have to be an organizational thing, but as we speak, wherever we are, we build that capacity of consciousness.
Quick final word from you, Nolitha. The situation, universities, and your view, your take on what's happening with young people, and as a leader yourself, advice, comment, briefly?
With the education system and the situation at universities, I fully support and understand where the students are coming from, especially the issue of free education for the poor. And I think for me, where it is a challenge, the dialogue where it's at this point in time, is that there is lack of clarity once again and guidance from the leaders, and that includes people like myself and also so the voices of civil society, business, including government, to say, how do we get to this as soon as possible, rather than having to debate the percentages and the affordability issues or not, because it's something that has got to be done, but we just have got to work on a closer, clear timetable to deliver.
Nolitha Fakude, thank you very much. Sipho Nkosi, much appreciated. And I hope that it goes a long way to the kinds of dialogues that you say we should have in this nation. Much appreciated.